And I do think it's very, very similar. And remember,
Yeah.
it's similar because greed and fear are what rules investors, right? And it's not, there's no fundamentals. It's greed and fear. Fear drives it to the downside. Greed drives it to the upside, to the crazy extremes. And so
Right.
the Lehman collapse created the same type of fear that the FTX one is, which is people drawing out their money from exchanges and so forth. So it's kind of cool to think about it like that. But then that's, to me, what I'm expecting here. I think this is the final drop. The writing was on the wall that we were going to head lower. And the question is, how low are we going to go? And you could see this channel here. If we connect these lows and drag it up to these highs here, this was a bearish channel. I mean, when you have a drop like this and price consolidates without breaking to the upside, it inevitably breaks to the downside. So to me, this is the next move to the downside. Now, what's interesting about this is I do look at it as the beginning of the last move down, meaning that wherever we bottom out here is likely the bottom in Bitcoin.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Daily Crypto. In today's video, we will have the chief market strategist from InTheMoneyStocks.com and VerifiedInvestingCrypto.com, Gareth Soloway, making another Bitcoin price prediction. Gareth says the moment we're living with all the fear around crypto due to FTX and other bad actors is the beginning of the last move down. He even calls it Bitcoin's last drop. So please pay close attention until the end to know where and when we can see the final bottoms. Not only that, but he will also go through what's happening with Meta and even other cryptos like Ethereum and Binance. Let's start with Meta.
That 88, 86 level came from this channel, right? So we were stuck in this longer term channel. Every time we got to the high end, we would then get pushed down to the low end. And that's really where that level came from. Inclusive of that was this long-term trend line going back all the way to 2015. So that was kind of the bullish side of it. And then in addition, you know me, I'm a contrarian, Paul, and everyone was hating on this stock when it was in the 90s and the high 80s. And for me, that's like, okay, well, if everyone hates it, then anyone who was going to sell probably already sold, which means there's probably no one or minimal sellers left, more buyers on any sort of positive news. And what did we get? We got a thing saying, okay, we're going to see layoffs here, which is cost cutting, which is exactly what the market just needed, a bone from Mark Zuckerberg, right? They just needed some recognition that he wasn't really driving the company into the ground. And here he's showing some fiscal responsibility, which we wish the Fed would do kind of too, but
What about Ethereum? With all that's happening now, can it finally flip Bitcoin?
That's such a good question. I'm not sure if I have a great answer for that. By no means do I have any insights that are any different. I think that there's always that chance. I think it depends on the projects that continue to be developed on the network. The question I guess I would throw back is if we see a big slowdown in the economy and some of these projects that were developed on the Ethereum network go belly up, does that then hurt the price of Ethereum? And I'm not sure if it will, but it would just be something that I would kind of think about as it seems like Ethereum's more like a security that would be important based on economic activity versus Bitcoin, which is more of a commodity. Whoever comes out and survives this next period in crypto, that's going to be the long-lasting king at that point, or queen. And I do think that that's the positive for Ethereum, is that it certainly seems like it's the most stable of these layers to be built on. The chart is still very vulnerable, right? So we have this trend line down here, which connects through these two lows and through this area. And what you could see is when price broke down, it bounced, but it couldn't recapture that trend line and still has faded here. So for me, as I'm watching this, I'm watching that area. Can price get back into this kind of wedge pattern, maybe break above this? But as long as it stays below here, it is vulnerable to potentially retesting the lows down here.
And before Gareth Soloway makes his Bitcoin price prediction, what about other cryptos like BNB? Is Binance on the right track to succeed as the #1 crypto exchange? Is it the Amazon of the crypto era?
Yeah, so right now it's holding support. So I mean, if there's one to keep an eye on in terms of potential upside, you could see this trend line here, definitely holding that line. You can see we're right on it. So as an investor, if you're thinking about investing in this, and obviously this isn't advice, but you would want to see price hold this 270 level. If it starts trading below and holding below, it does become vulnerable for a move to the downside. But right now, comparatively to the Solanas, to even Ethereum, it's at least holding its own. And I think bottom line is, when you look at what went on with FTX and what you can see from other exchanges that have had trouble, a lot of people are saying, okay, which are going to be the ones that are standing following this period? And I think right now the feeling is that Binance is going to be one of those, and that's why price is holding up a lot better.
Now let's go to Bitcoin. There's a lot to talk about this, so pay close attention.
The writing was on the wall that we were going to head lower, and the question is, how low are we going to go? And you could see this channel here. If we connect these lows and drag it up to these highs here, this was a bearish channel. I mean, when you have a drop like this and price consolidates without breaking to the upside, it inevitably breaks to the downside. So to me, this is the next move to the downside. Now, what's interesting about this is I do look at it as the beginning of the last move down, meaning that wherever we bottom out here is likely the bottom in Bitcoin. A couple things, and this is going to what I was talking about in the video that I wanted to reveal, is that basically when I look at FTX, I see Lehman Brothers. And I haven't heard anyone else drawing this comparison, but if you look at the power that Lehman was in that time as one of the major banks and where FTX was as one of the major exchanges, both of them failing make a lot of sense as being that catalyst. When Lehman Brothers occurred, all right, this is where it occurred right here.
Yeah.
You can see that the S&P was not at a bottom, so it wasn't the bottom, but it kind of created that last drop in the markets that brought us to the low of 2009. And so one of the things I was thinking about is, okay, it took about 6 months from Lehman Brothers to the low on the S&P 500. So in that thought process, if FTX is the Lehman event of the crypto markets, you're looking at about 5 to 6 months before we bottom, which puts us in April of next year, May, somewhere June-ish, right in that vicinity. And then if you look at the price decline, it went from about 1,200 and change to the low in 2009 of around 600 and change. So 40 to 50% decline.
According to Gareth, we have around 5 to 6 months before the bottom comes. He said yesterday that for Bitcoin to reveal its bottom finally, we need regulation to step in. When that happens, big institutions will feel safe investing in these risk assets, and we know that many are already funding other companies related to FTX. Kevin O'Leary, for example, was one of the investors in Sam Bankman-Fried's company and was probably also recommending it. So how's Bitcoin's final drop happening next year?
What's fascinating about this is that you basically take a 50% decline from about 18,500, which was the break point, and if you zoom out, there's a long-term trend line going back to 2017 before the bull market to the 2018 lows of the bear market to the crypto low. And where does that trend line go? Basically to that 40, 50% decline. So for me, I start to put the pieces of the puzzle together and say, okay, this cycle, again, not quite the same as past cycles. This will be a little bit of a bigger correction, which makes sense with the Fed and with what's going on with FTX. But again, you can kind of start to see the similarities developing in this environment versus what happened in the Lehman Brothers collapse. And I do think it's very, very similar. And remember, it's similar because greed and fear are what rules investors, right? It's not, there's no fundamentals. It's greed and fear. Fear drives it to the downside. Greed drives it to the upside, to the crazy extremes. And so the Lehman collapse created the same type of fear that the FTX one is, which is people drawing out their money from exchanges and so forth. So it's kind of cool to think about it like that. But then that's, to me, what I'm expecting here. I think this is the final drop, and I think we'll bottom in the next 5-6 months. Yeah, so there's no doubt there is going to be a chain reaction of issues, right? I mean, when you have these institutions, number one, the biggest thing for crypto right now is that when you have big institutions that get burned to the tune of billions of dollars that they invested in FTX, they're not going to go invest in more crypto projects until we get regulation and transparency. So right away, that just shuts off that door to the rest of cryptocurrency. And that's a problem, right? I mean, it's going to stop innovation in the near term. It's going to make it so hard to raise any capital until we get this regulation out there. So I think overall, he's right in that it's going to cause more pain. There's no doubt that it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of other, hopefully no one any bigger than FTX, but there's going to be other bankruptcies. And I think if you look at the .com era and compare what went on there, you have to expect a lot of these smaller cryptos to ultimately get flushed out and go to zero. Again, in the dot-com era, we saw the same sort of greed driving some of these companies that had no reason to go up to $100 million valuations or greater go up, and they had to be taken out. And I think that's exactly what we'll see here in the crypto market for the next 3 to 6 months.
Okay, but when will Bitcoin finally thrive, as we all want? When is it the time to go back to all-time highs?
So to me, I think that for Bitcoin, that's actually part of the first dip. So right now, we're technically, they haven't announced that we're in a recession. I think we probably are, but according to the Fed and government, we're not yet. So I think this is the first phase. What I'm thinking is the first phase is what helps drive Bitcoin to its low pivot. And then I actually believe that the second phase, where the economy actually is going to suffer the most, will actually be where Bitcoin flips and starts to become a safe haven for assets. And the reason it's going to flip is because you're going to start to have a lot of investors looking at the economy getting worse and worse and worse, and they're going to start giving up on stocks like Apple and Microsoft and these other ones as the consumer just runs away. And so the question is, well, where do you put your money at that point? And this is going on the assumption that we do have regulation and transparency within that period. But I do think that once we get that transparency in the crypto market, smart money, billionaires, they're going to start moving towards Bitcoin. And I actually think in that second dip, Bitcoin actually outperforms.
Do we deserve your like and subscribe? If you enjoyed this content, please do it. And don't forget to share it with people who want to learn more about the crypto markets and profit from them. Check our comments section for another recommended video to watch next, which has a ton of value. Thank you so much for watching.